Okay, so you want to flip houses for a living. Here's the version you've seen 100 times on television. You buy an ugly, outdated house for way under market price. You spend a few weeks putting in new floors and painting the cabinets, and you sell it a couple months later for $100,000 more than you paid. Buy low, glow up, sell high, repeat. It looks like the fastest, most controllable way to make real money in real estate. Because unlike a rental, you're not waiting decades for appreciation. You're manufacturing a profit on purpose, on your own timeline. It sounds almost too clean, like finding money that everyone else walked past without noticing. And there's a reason the fantasy is so persistent. House flipping really did produce enormous profits during certain windows, especially when home prices were rising quickly and renovated homes were in short supply. Flippers completed roughly 250,000 home flips in the United States in a recent full year, and the average gross profit per flip has run somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000, depending on the market and the year. That's real money. It is also, as you're about to find out, a very misleading number. So naturally, you assume that a $70,000 gross profit means the flipper walked away with $70,000 in their pocket. It does not even close. By the end of this, you will know exactly how much of that headline profit actually survives all the way to a flipper's bank account, why speed matters more than almost anything else in this business, and why the exact same house can make one flipper rich and bankrupt another. People assume the profit on a flip is simply the sale price minus the purchase price. It is not really. That number is called gross profit, and it completely ignores everything that happens in between buying the house and selling it. Think of gross profit like a company's total revenue before you subtract a single expense. It looks impressive on a headline, but it tells you almost nothing about whether the business actually made money. The real number that matters is net profit, what's actually left after every single cost involved in the flip, and that number is dramatically smaller. Let's walk through where that gross profit actually goes, because this is the part almost nobody explains before someone quits their job to flip houses full-time. The first bite is renovation costs, and beginners consistently underestimate this by 30 to 50%. A light cosmetic flip, new paint, flooring, and fixtures can still run $20,000 to $40,000 on an average-sized home. A full gut renovation touching the kitchen, bathrooms, roof, and systems can easily run past $100,000. And unexpected discoveries behind the walls, old wiring, hidden water damage, foundation cracks routinely add another 10 to 20% to the budget nobody planned for. The second bite is holding costs, and this is the one that quietly destroys flippers who move too slowly. Every single month a flipper owns that property, they're paying the mortgage or hard money loan interest, property taxes, insurance, and utilities, whether or not any work is happening inside. Hard money loans, the short-term, higher interest financing most flippers use because traditional banks won't touch a renovation project, typically charge somewhere between 10 and 15% annual interest plus points, an upfront fee of 1 to 3% of the loan just to originate it. On a $200,000 renovation loan, that can mean $1,800 to $2,500 a month in interest alone, accumulating from the day the flipper closes on the house until the day a buyer's check clears, regardless of how the renovation is going. The third bite is transaction costs on both ends, and these are frequently the most underestimated expense in the entire budget. Buying the house involves closing costs, typically 1 to 3% of the purchase price. Selling the house involves a real estate agent's commission, usually 5 to 6% of the sale price, split between the buyers and sellers' agents, plus more closing costs on that side too. On a $300,000 sale, agent commissions alone can run $15,000 to $18,000, money that disappears before the flipper ever sees a dividend from their work. Layer in capital gains, taxes on the profit, which for a flip held less than a year are typically taxed as ordinary income rather than the lower long-term capital gains rate, and the government quietly claims another meaningful slice too. This is why professional flippers obsess over one metric more than any other: the 70% rule. It's a simple gut check formula. Never pay more for a house than 70% of its after-repair value, minus the estimated renovation cost. If a house will be worth $300,000 fully renovated and the renovation will cost $40,000, the maximum a disciplined flipper should pay for that house is $170,000. That 30% gap isn't greed, it's the built-in cushion that has to absorb every surprise, every holding cost, every commission, and every market shift between the day you buy and the day you sell. Flippers who ignore this rule and stretch to win a bidding war are the ones who end up flipping houses for a loss. There's also a scaling problem that trips up almost every flipper who tries to turn this into a real career instead of a one-off project. Flipping one house at a time means your income comes in occasional, lumpy chunks. Months of nothing followed by one large payday, followed by months of nothing again while you find and close on the next deal. To turn this into a steady living, flippers have to run 3 or 4 projects simultaneously, which multiplies every risk we've already talked about. It means juggling multiple hard money loans at once, multiple contractor crews, multiple insurance policies, and multiple sets of holding costs ticking away in the background at the same time. It also means needing serious cash reserves, because if 2 projects hit surprises in the same month, a flipper without reserves can find themselves unable to pay a contractor, which stalls the project further and compounds the very holding costs they were trying to avoid. This is why most successful full-time flippers eventually build relationships with private lenders willing to fund deals based on the property's potential rather than the flipper's personal credit, essentially using other people's money to run several projects at once instead of tying up their own limited cash in a single house. Market timing risk is the other piece nobody budgets for. A flip typically takes 4 to 9 months from purchase to closed sale. That's 4 to 9 months where interest rates can rise, buyer demand can soften, or a wave of new listings can hit the same neighborhood right as your renovation finishes. A flipper isn't just betting on their own renovation skills, they're making an unhedged bet on where the entire local housing market will be months into the future. A bet plenty of professional investors with far more resources get wrong regularly. This is part of why flipping activity tends to shrink sharply whenever mortgage rates rise quickly. Fewer buyers means homes sit longer, and every extra week on the market is a week of interest payments eating into a shrinking profit margin. Speed is the single most underrated force in this entire business, and it's why the best flippers behave almost like a factory line rather than artists lovingly restoring a home. Every extra month a house sits unsold is another month of loan interest, taxes, insurance, and utilities eating into the profit, while the market itself might be quietly shifting against you. A flip that would have profited handsomely if sold in 90 days can turn into a loss if it drags on for 9 months, not because the renovation quality changed, but because holding costs simply compounded that whole extra time. This is exactly why experienced flippers pick contractors based on reliability and speed as much as price, and why they often sacrifice a slightly higher renovation quality for a faster, more predictable timeline. Now let's put real numbers next to 2 very different flips. In the good scenario, a flipper buys a distressed 3-bedroom house for $160,000 using a hard money loan and budgets $40,000 for a focused kitchen, bathroom, and flooring renovation. The renovation finishes in exactly 10 weeks, right on schedule. They list the finished home at $300,000 and it sells in 3 weeks. After roughly $8,000 in loan interest, $6,000 in closing costs on the purchase, and $18,000 in agent commissions and closing costs on the sale, the net profit lands around $68,000 on a project that took about 5 months start to finish. That's a genuinely excellent outcome, and it's the version everyone puts on their thumbnail. In the realistic, harder scenario, a flipper buys a similar house, but the contractor uncovers outdated plumbing and a cracked foundation section once the walls come open, adding $25,000 and 8 extra weeks to the renovation timeline. By the time it's finally listed, interest rates have ticked up and buyer demand has cooled slightly, so the home sits on the market for 2 additional months and eventually sells for $10,000 under the original asking price. By the time you add the extra months of loan interest, the blown renovation budget, and the price reduction, that same $70,000 projected profit shrinks to somewhere around $15,000 for 9 months of work, risk, and stress. Same house, same neighborhood, same starting plan. The only difference was execution. The zoom-out truth about flipping houses is this: it is not a real estate strategy. It is a construction and logistics business that happens to use a house as its product. The profit doesn't come from finding a cheap house. Plenty of people can find a cheap house. It comes from accurately pricing the renovation before you buy, controlling the timeline like your income depends on it, because it does, and building in a big enough cushion between what you pay and what it's actually worth to survive the surprises that show up behind literally every wall. Flippers who treat this like a hobby lose money. Flippers who treat it like running a small manufacturing operation on a strict deadline with a strict budget are the ones who do it for a living. There's a version of real estate investing that requires none of this. No contractors, no renovation surprises, no rushing to sell before holding costs pile up, where the entire business model is buying massive metal boxes and simply renting empty space by the month. That's exactly where we're headed next, into the economics of owning a self-storage facility.